Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Owens is ahead. Strandberg and Boschmeyer fighting. Owens' only challenger is Metcalf. Metcalf comes up, but Owens wins in 10.3. Second, Metcalf America. Third, Osendorp of Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hey there, folks. I'm one of your hosts, James, and sure would love to see an athlete embarrass Hitler right now.
Well, perhaps it takes a figure like Jesse Owens to come back in these trying times, these unprecedented and yet so precedented times. Diaz back with you once again. We do have a very special guest. He did not medal at the Berlin Olympics, but he does have a thing or two to say about Berlin. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, fuck Germany. We hate that country for all the things that they've done and still continue to do. It is me, the number one hater of Germany, Xavier.
Xavier, just curious, what's one thing that you don't like that Germany does nowadays?
The Bundesliga.
Okay, fair enough.
I hate that all of the good teams are either owned by companies, which is really weird, or are Bayern Munich, who I hate.
See, I was going to say, my understanding of it is there's exactly two teams, both located in Bayern, and everyone else is just like the people that they play on their schedule.
Well, so first of all, Bayern is in Munich.
Then what's FC Bayern?
So I think you're thinking of Bayer, which is
okay. I thought it was FC Bayern and Bayern Munich. And I even knew the name was Munich, so the fact that I was not in that moment realizing.
There's a second Munich team that's 1860 Munich. I believe they're in the second division right now. But right now, I'm fairly certain you're thinking of Leverkusen, who won the league unbeaten last year. But they're Bayer Leverkusen because they're owned by Bayer, the pharmaceutical company that makes Advil.
Yeah, pop, fizz. It's the champagne bottles.
So so there's Bayer that owns Leverkusen. There is Leipzig, which is owned by Red Bull. And then I believe Hoffenheim is also owned by just one dude who made a massive rich company and then just built a team in his own hometown that has 3,000 people in it. So it's a top flight.
Again, one of the best things that you could do if you have an insane amount of money.
Yeah, it's the guy who made SAP. He owns Hoffenheim. It was a 5th division team in a village of 3,000 people that he was from. And so he just built a 30,000 seat stadium in his 3,000 person village and made them a Bundesliga team.
It's Foxborough.
Or their version of State College becomes the third most populous town in Pennsylvania on days that Penn State has a football game. That is what Hoffenheim is to Germany.
Foxborough Stadium holds approximately 47,000 more people than the city of Foxborough.
I love it.
I don't truly hate the Bundesliga, though. I hate a lot of teams in the Bundesliga. The Bundesliga itself has some fun teams in it.
Borussia Dortmund is one, right?
Yeah,
yes.
Dortmund is one.
There we
I would like to go to the yellow wall at some point.
Well, and they still the 50+1 rule. That's what the Bundesliga has, right? So
yeah, but they've kind of just made it not count if they don't feel like it, and that's why Leverkusen exists, and Hoffenheim exists, and Leipzig exists. So the 50+1 rule exists, but they've broken it many, many times, and then just kind of say it still exists. It's like if the Premier League said, "Okay, no one can have more than 50% ownership." Except the country of Abu Dhabi or the Emirate of Abu Dhabi can own Manchester City, and the country of Saudi Arabia can own Newcastle, and Egypt could own Aston Villa, but no one else can have anyone rich own them ever.
That sounds fair. Those sound like good rules. What did they say?
Until they say, actually, we're punishing Newcastle because of things. So now Saudi Arabia owns Sunderland, and Newcastle can't have any wealthy investors.
Yeah, now that doesn't sound good. That sounds like a bad rule.
Okay, you guys have convinced me. We absolutely hate the Bundesliga. So let's not talk about the Bundesliga anymore. Let's talk about some other things that are making memories for us right now. What you guys got for us?
Yeah, so I'll go first because I got two quick things. One, the NCAA is allowing CHL players in starting next year, which is absolutely fascinating because obviously they had been like separate tracks where if you were a youth hockey player, you could go to the CHL and play in the OHL, QMJHL, WHL, or you can go to college and play, for a college team. And now you could go to the OHL if you want, if you're a Canadian prospect. And if after a year you're like, I would like to go to college and get a free college education while also growing my game, you'll be able to do that, which is going to be a massive change in how, youth hockey development occurs. And we might see a bigger wave of Canadians, especially top Canadian prospects, move to the NCAA, which could then increase the standing of college hockey. They're kind of in the phase where they're figuring out how it's going to work, but it is going into effect before the 2025-26 season, so I'm really excited to see what that leads to.
So I have two questions real quick, more as points of clarification. You said someone could do a juniors league for a year, then go to college. Are they able to then continue to do the two concurrently, or it's like you are not made ineligible from college if you have done juniors?
So the way it worked previously is that it's considered like a professional league, so it violated the amateur status.
Yes,
It no longer does as part of these new rules. It does not violate your college eligibility. I mean, because of timing, you couldn't do both at the same time, but I don't know technically if you could do, the WHL and then college hockey and then go back to the WHL. I don't know if that is allowed. I guess that'd be Canadian eligibility rules. But previously you could not do,
if you'd ever made a
juniors,
you couldn't do.
Yeah. Now you can. So that'd be very interesting to see what happens with that. And the other one is I outsourced this. I promised I'd bring this up because my dad has ranted about how much he hates this for many a year. But we have a nice Thursday night game coming up between the Bengals and the Ravens. A game that I would like to watch, and I'm sure that James would like to watch.
I'm still waiting to see whether or not I will be leaving for that after this.
My dad likes to pause games because he likes to get up and do stuff, make some food, come back, fast forward through the commercials, get back, catch up on highlights. Amazon Prime does not let you do this. For a company with as much money as Amazon, for these Thursday night games, you really can't just pause the game and go do something else. It just doesn't. It doesn't let you.
Well, what's especially stupid about it is it's not like it's an issue where, their infrastructure only allows them to stream out in real time. You can't it's not archiving as it goes. Because anytime you turn on the game, you have the option to join live, watch from beginning, or catch up on key plays, and then it'll catch you up to live. So it's we'll do the thing that Mr. Xavier's dad wants to do. We'll do it for him. We're not going to let him pick and choose when he comes back. Just listen, we'll show you all the important stuff. Don't worry about it. You can trust us.
And that keeps him from watching these games because he just hates the lack of, flexibility that the viewers have when watching that. And he literally asked me to bring this up on the podcast when I was on the phone with him earlier today. So, Dad, this is for you. Fuck Amazon, and they're not letting you fucking just pause and fast forward on Thursday night games.
Listen, I just want the Sixers to be normal, man. It's been so many years of the Sixers not being normal. And I'm not going to dive in too deeply on anything specifically. I'll just say Marcus Hayes is lucky that he got off with a little push from Joel Embiid. He's like very lucky that is as bad as it went. When like it's a question of like, did he invoke more his son or his dead brother when saying like you're dishonoring these people by not like playing hard and playing in the regular season? I don't know who it would be worse to insult or who he was intending to insult, but like just several lines that you do not cross, and he crossed all of them. The one thing that I want to say specifically that like he deserved to get his shit rocked is when Embiid was very like rightly saying, criticize my play, criticize that I'm not on the court. Don't bring up my son. Don't bring up my brother. I don't care what you write about. When he said that line at the end, I don't care what you write about, Marcus Hayes said, but you clearly do. How he didn't get the life fucking choked out of him at that instant, Joel Embiid has the restraint of a saint. That's all I'll say.
I like the idea that Diaz is just the Babadook meme, where he's in the front seat of the car. Why can't you be normal? And in the back, you see the entire city of Philadelphia just screeching.
That's truly what it feels like. It's the absolute worst. And then like, okay, fine. He gets the suspension. I acknowledge because he touched a reporter, he had to get suspended. 3 games probably seems about right. The fact that we always have to pretend that suspensions are about what's the actual right amount of time, because of course his fucking first game is at home in the inaugural first game of the NBA Cup against the New York Knicks. Like, of fucking course. I can almost guarantee the first suspension they came up with was 5 games, and then they said, ooh, wait, we have Sixers Knicks on national TV. And then Adam Silver said, okay, 3 games.
Especially with Maxey out, they need some star power in that game.
Right, and that's what I'm going to say too, man. Like, it's like, okay, we just got to do 2 more games.
And then everyone's going to be on the court.
And we'll finally have the whole team. And then no Tyrese Maxey, who has never had an injury, like, ever, I think, in his time as a Sixer. He, like, missed, like, a game for a concussion once. He missed a game for an ankle sprain once. But for this to be his first extended absence and for it to come right before we get Embiid back, like, I just know the story of the year is going to come down to the Sixers are going to be this 42-40 team, probably in the play-in again. But, and what I'm going to cling on to is it's going to be like, you know, Embiid, Maxey, and PG only played 20 games together this season, but they were 18-2 in those 20 games.
And think of how little mileage will be on all of them, thanks to all these injuries. But still, they're
all going to be just healthy enough. Their clocks are going to align for the 2 months from April to June, and it's going to happen. But man, it's the most anticipated season of the process, probably, in terms of like, okay, we have entered with the stars fully aligned. It's going to happen this year. And I don't know, man. I'm looking at Tankathon again. That's all I'm saying. Top 6 protected first round pick. It is a thought.
This is still the year, but if it turns into your Tim Duncan draft lottery year in the midst of many years, wouldn't be the worst thing.
Dude, I would be absolutely fine. If you told me right now, hey, this year sucks, but guess what? You're getting Cooper Flag. I would take it. I would take it right now, because then not only do we have the now window, we then have the, okay, Embiid retired, PG retired. Maxey and Cooper Flag. That is a hell of a one.
Veteran Maxey, yeah, and Cooper Flag coming into his prime.
I would be okay with that. That would not be the worst thing in the world. But this is the beauty and the agony of being a sports fan. It's the worst right now, but if it can just be a little worse, then it might actually be really amazing in about a year.
Speaking of the worst thing in the world, I'm gonna make a perhaps silly choice and like try and speak earnestly for a moment through a sports story that I looked up today. You all not remember as an experience, but you know, you're familiar with the Holocaust.
I've heard of this thing.
Cool.
I heard it was pretty bad.
It's fucking horrible. Fucking horrible. About as bad as anyone's ever done to other people. So, during that time in the Terezin ghetto, which was near Prague in what is now the Czech Republic, then Czechoslovakia, near the Sudetenland area specifically, if you really want to get into it. In the Terezin ghetto, there was a soccer league that was set up. It was a self-administered soccer league run by Jews in the ghetto at that time, running from 1942 to 1944. There is, if you look it up, not only a documentary about it, the documentary is very thoroughly built around footage of one game that they happen to have incredibly detailed footage of on September 1st, 1944. And this is just before the vast majority of these players get sent to extermination camps. This was, if you have not figured it out, also an extensive propaganda measure by the Nazi government to kind of give off this idea of normalcy, this idea of good treatment of people in the ghettos. It's the story that we all got in our history textbooks about the nice slave owners in the American South, whom, and I'm deeply ashamed of this, but related to. Anyway, this is all to the fact that this was used as a propaganda measure does not take away from the fact that, one, this was a way for people to, in the face of oppression, stand up, not even stand up, just continue to find something to enjoy. And it was, for these players, a way to make the best of a horrible, horrible situation. And I am trying to emphasize that to distance what you and I and those of us listening, because if any Trump supporters are still listening to this show at this point, fucking why? Given that this episode is coming out approximately a week after a bunch of just objectively and across the board mean and hurtful and bad people that we knew existed, but admittedly more millions than I thought existed. People who want to give someone the authority to hurt people they don't like because then it gives them the authority in their lives to hurt people that they don't like. That is the animus. And that was, I don't know about you guys, my initial reaction. I wanted to hurt people in response. And the thing that I have tried to cling to for positivity in the past 36 hours is that while we are outnumbered, we are not alone. And we three are also, just to be very clear, in a pretty good place for the next however many years that all of this goes on. We're all probably going to be quote unquote fine. But I do hope that anyone listening to this who is in a more precarious position or knows people in a more precarious position, I would say one, just reach out if you ever want help from us, if there is something that we can do. But also just whatever opportunity presents itself, even if it is not a perfect one, if it can make things moderately better, if it can protect anyone from the hurt of those bastards, do it. And I would also just reiterate this point, RTG as a show, we are recurring donors to the Baltimore Abortion Fund and the Abortion Fund of Pennsylvania. So two places that we personally, as a group, recommend to certainly continue to contribute to. And with all that, unless you gentlemen have anything you want to add in this moment.
I have a zinger. Obviously this whole situation is horrible, but this was a stark reminder that the only people that hate Latinos more than white people are other Latinos.
I'm glad that you said that. I certainly am not allowed to say that.
Of course. No. I'm not, and that's why I used my better half to deliver that statement.
You busted the accent just a tiny bit out.
Exactly. You got hit Latino. It can't be Latinos. It's no.
Can't be Latinx.
Dude, another thing. We need to get rid of that. It's the people that we think we're trying to market don't like it.
If someone asks for it, cool, fine. If someone who is of that identity asks for it, cool. Otherwise, It ain't gonna work.
Tangent a bit, but I a couple weeks ago saw a big study on that, and the study showed overwhelming majorities of Latino people hate it, and I'm one of those. I hate it. And you know what the quote-unquote solution that the authors of the paper found? Educate Latino people to not be homophobic because they believe that the X on it being hated by Latino people was because they were homophobic and transphobic. And all of the responses were, no, Latino people just hate the idea that you made up a word for them that does not flow in the Spanish language when they already have plenty of words to refer to themselves and do not like it being forced upon them. I had no idea that it was some sort of like response to,
it's a gender neutral thing, but straight up, as a non-binary individual that has worked in kitchens that are exclusively staffed by Spanish speaking people and myself, they just called me Latine. Like, they gave me a different vowel and everything, and it was very appreciated. It was like very reaffirming, and also it sounded like fucking Spanish.
It's the whole patronizing thing, which is a broader symptom of many things, of like, hey, we came up with this word for you. You don't like it? Why don't you like it? Oh, it's because you're homophobic. So instead of changing the words to what you like, learn not to be homophobic. And it's like, not great. Not great if you're doing a whole study on this, that's your takeaway.
Soy yo quien es el problema, no es los pinches latinos.
That's the note to put out here, folks. Sorry that this has been a little bit of a bummer and that we're like doing the just wheel spinning that we normally do at the end of an episode, but we're not going to have that because we've already recorded the end of this episode and we got to do it with a new friend of the show. This was a segment taken last week, so everyone's in a slightly different mood. But before we throw to that, because we will not rap properly, I'll just say I straight up wanted to like cancel this show forever yesterday, truly. And I still am like teetering a little bit, but it has refreshed my soul to chat with the two of you and knowing that the handful of people that will listen to this are joining in too and choosing to join in and choosing to seek this out. And that is why I probably am leaning to sticking with it now. Anyway, we're super excited to talk to Russ Bengston. Here's that segment. Ladies and gentlemen and everyone else, today we have got an author, former editor of Slam and Complex, and also, as I understand it correctly from my notes here, big fan of the 1992 Robert Redford and Sidney Poitier vehicle Sneakers. Russ Bengston, welcome to the show.
You know what? I don't think I've actually ever seen that movie, and I should probably watch it at some point, just to...
Yeah, I will clarify, no shoes really involved in it whatsoever. It is a spy caper. I do want to take 1 second because I made this dumb joke about sneakers earlier today, and I've then looked up the cast, and it's incredible. It says Robert Redford, Sidney Poitier, Dan Aykroyd, James Earl Jones, River Phoenix, and like the single greatest that guy in the history of acting, Stephen Tobolowsky, Ned Ryerson from Groundhog Day. Fucking
I remembered Aykroyd was in it for some reason, but bananas.
But no, your expertise is actually in the shoes, Russ. You are the author of a lot of work about shoes. Most importantly, oh my god, I can't believe I didn't pull it up to make sure I got the title absolutely correct.
A History of 15 Sneakers. I can provide the title.
But yeah, you are a shoe guru, and that is part of why we've brought you on today, because I don't want to speak for Xavier and Diaz here. I am so largely agnostic about shoes that I'm going to admit a story real quick, which is all of mine are black and white sneakers to the point where I accidentally wore a mismatching pair of shoes to work today. This is not a joke.
Shouldn't get away with that. I mean, you never know when you might start a whole new trend.
Well, Skechers and Puma, that apparently is the move. But this is all to like say I am indeed as sneaker neophyte as you can be. And so to start this off, in your own words, what do you think makes a good sneaker, a great sneaker, or just to like be a little cute about it, a guy sneaker?
Well, you know, like there's so much out there now. And it's like in writing the book, I thought about it too, where it's like if you go back to the 80s and 90s, like there were only so many really good ones. And it didn't have to be high end, but like, you know, you'd know it when you saw it. And once you hit like the 2000s, the early 2000s, and retro started being this huge thing, now it's like, I mean, you can walk into a sneaker store or go online or whatever it is, whichever way you choose to shop, and almost everything is good now. You know, like it's almost hard to find something that's bad. Unless you wear one Skechers and one Puma, in which case I don't know to help you with that.
I just want to be honest about who I am here. I don't want to put on any airs about knowing what I'm talking about.
But it's tough because, like, I think now it's so, like, you know, the spectrum of good is so wide. Like, there's current shoes that are good, but they're competing against stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And brands are intentionally putting this stuff in history up against what should be the most sought after stuff, which is the newest. You know, and that was kind of like, again, to go back to like working on the book, where it's like, when new stuff came out, it was the big thing because that's what there was. I might not have loved the new Air, but it was the new, and you bought it because of that. And now it's like, you know, a new Air Jordan, a new LeBron, a new whatever releases, and it's like, it might disappear without a trace because everyone's buying whatever the cool shoe from 1985 was. And I realize I'm totally dodging your question.
No, I think that's totally fair because I'm thinking of the fucking line from The Incredibles where Syndrome's like, when everyone's special, no one will be special. Like, is that the problem that you find it running into when you've got...
100%.
Because theoretically, it's only the best old ones that are lying around, and so you just end up with all of the peak, which is the cutting edge of whatever you're doing, and also the guys that have been battle tested as a brand over and over again.
Well, and then also you go and, like, you know, back in the 90s or the early 2000s, like, collaborations were kind of unusual. Like, for a brand to say to, whether it be a creative person or a store, like, hey, do you have an idea for this shoe? Or, like, you know, we'll do whatever model with your idea. All that stuff sold through because I only make 100 or 200. And brands saw that and thought, like, oh, limited edition in collaboration with somebody, like, is an instant sellout. So now there's like thousands of those. Like, they happen all the time and they're just not special anymore. One individual shoe maybe is really hard to get, but when there's 500 shoes releasing a year that are all hard to get, like, it just stops being interesting, really. And, you know, I've kind of gone back to when I was at Slam, when I was at Complex, I was on, like, all the seating lists, all the invite lists, you know, getting God knows how many pairs a week. And, like, the past few years, I've been scaling back and getting rid of a lot. And I've kind of gone back to a lot of the stuff I had before all that. You know, stuff I got, like, in the 90s, or just things that aren't super exclusive or whatever, but is just sort of a, you know, either a time-tested good shoe, like an Adidas Campus or an Adidas Stan Smith or something like that. Or, on the other hand, try and go back to, like, you know what, just get the newest thing that people might not even recognize, whether it be the Adidas AE1 or, you know, I don't even know. It's funny, like, the Jordan 39 came out recently, and I haven't even seen it in a store. Like, stores, as far as I know, haven't even stocked it where I am, like, out on suburban Long Island, and it's like, that's kind of insane.
Is that, like, representative of demand, or is that representative of how online the buying of it all is?
It might be a little, but I think it's like, you know, shelf space is so dedicated now to retro, and, you know, that stuff sells. So, you know, why take a risk if you're a store or if you're a consumer on something new that no one's seen before, and maybe people won't think it's cool? When I can go buy an Air Jordan 1 and, like, oh, well, of course that's cool.
This feels very reminiscent of, like, record stores and how much they have to, like, devote shelf space to vintage vinyl now. It's just not something that I was aware of, that those were so kind of parallel.
And I think, like, with music, it's a little bit different, only because, like, you know, well, I guess it's tough because MTV doesn't do videos much anymore, and I don't even know, like, radio stations that play new music. But, you know, new music does still get played, or bands do go on tour, although it's incredible how many old bands are still touring. Like, I remember when I was in junior high school, I think it was, The Who had their farewell tour. And, like, those guys are still touring. But, you know, there is a market for new music more so, I think, than the sneaker stuff. You know, it's like, I think the sneaker comparison is more like, imagine the Rolling Stones, who, again, Lord knows how they're doing it.
We've already passed the steel wheelchairs joke from The Simpsons.
Exactly. Steel Wheels was what, like 1989?
Yeah.
Imagine if, I think the sneaker equivalent to that is if the Rolling Stones touring now were competing against another version of the Rolling Stones from 1967 who were also touring. And it's like, which one are you going to go see? I'm sorry, apologies to Keith Richards and Mick Jagger. I'm going to go see them when they're young. So it's like trying to compete against that. And I guess there is some level of that with albums because it's like, well, yeah, I'm going to buy like Some Girls or Let It Bleed, before I buy what new album pushing. I don't know. I think in music, they're certainly content to be sort of not retro, but like, catalog acts. But it's got to be weird if you're a band, then it's like, wait a minute, they're not asking for any songs we've written since like 1981.
Just the joke that like the new stuff is always what gets the booze at a concert.
Yeah, and it's like Iron Maiden is touring off like a 35-year-old album right now and like playing it straight through. And it's like, okay, that's great that you guys are still able to make a living doing this, but like, isn't that kind of depressing as musicians? No one wants to hear what you're working on anymore.
It's the clearest proof that you peaked at some point.
Either you peaked or your fans did. It's like you think if you're and that's what's weird to me with sneakers too, where it's like if you look at like Day and like stuff Bobbito wrote about or stuff I talked about with Clark Kent, rest in peace. He passed away, this past week, and it's still kind of difficult. The whole thing about sneakers back then was like you wanted the newest stuff. You wanted the newest stuff so people would see it and be like, yo, what are those? And now it's like kind of shifted into like people wearing stuff so when someone else sees it to be like, oh my God, do you know how much those are worth? And it's like, that's never what it was about. And it's kind of sad to see it turn to that. Like when I talked to Bobbito for the book, and I'm him for God knows how long at this point, 30 years, but like he talked about seeing the Air Force One on a wall of a sneaker store and being like, oh my, like, what is this? And to me, like the modern sneakerhead or the modern kid, we shouldn't be telling them like, yo, you need to go get this because this was cool in 1982. Like, yo, 1982 was a long time ago, 40 years ago almost.
40, yeah.
They should be grabbing something off the wall that's new and being, I have to have this. Like that should be the thing, not trying to relive like our childhood or my childhood.
It's like a more a recognition than seeing something new. Now it is about like being able to see some kind of iconic symbol that has already been built up instead of trying to make something new.
Right. I mean, it's the equivalent of going back and watching like Michael Jordan's games on DVD instead of like watching the current NBA. Like, yo, cool things are happening and you should probably be paying attention to them. Yeah, like Jordan was incredible and people my age grew up watching him and like either being a fan in my case or like rooting hard against him in other cases. Like, yeah, that was us. The generation previous to me was the same with Dr. J, and the previous to that, it was like Bill Russell or whatever. And now you have LeBron, you had Kobe. And I think NBA fan or sports fans are good. Like, they acknowledge who was great. But like, even if you loved the Patriots and Tom Brady, you're probably not watching his games all the time. You're watching the current NFL. And that's kind of what's weird with consumer products in general, where it's like we've gotten into these loops. The idea of just buying the same old stuff over and over and over again. Somewhere along the line, you need to break that.
That ties really well into one other question I had for you. The three of us have talked on this show a lot about like the rot that has infected sports, and I've followed you online for a long time. I know that you're also a known critic. I feel like there is a way in which sports could have existed without being commodified. Maybe that's like a little idealistic, but with regards to like sneaker culture, it is by its nature based around a commodity. And I've seen you kind of talk about the rot getting to it as well. Do you think there was ever a way where that was going to be possible to not exist? Like, was there a way that it could have avoided that? Because we can imagine the way where like sports stay as in the most realistic sense, the Green Bay Packers. And at the very least, they are a publicly owned thing. There is an example of something like that working out in the world as a bigger form of just your local soccer club.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a case of the brands getting too big. And people like myself, or, not me particularly, but like people who were super, super, super into it, going to work for brands or doing things for brands. Because like they wouldn't have known necessarily like what was cool until after the fact. Like a shoe would come out and sell like crazy and they'd be like, yo, like why? And until someone from the consumer side explained it to them, they would have no idea. I think like, again, going back to before retro, it's like by the time you knew what was hot like that, your designer's 2 more seasons ahead. So it's not like you could really turn around and be like, all right, we're just going to do like another version of that or 20 more versions of that, which they do now. I think things got really fast, and also brands really tried to control every aspect of it, and they still do. And really tough for me is like, and it's funny because Bobbito calls it out in his book, and I remember the first time I read it, I was like, yo, you're crazy. What are you talking about? And like, as I've gotten older, I realize he's right, where it's like, he said the original Air Jordan was basically the beginning of the end. And I was like, yo, like, I grew up in suburban Long Island. Like, I was 14 years old when it released in 1985. Like, for me, that was an entry. That was like, wait a minute, this stuff is amazing. But from his perspective, and again, he's been proven right, that was when sneakers became like top down, where it's like the brand was like, this is cool and you need this. And people bought in. Everyone bought in because it's like, well, that's easy. Then I already know what's cool. I don't have to like see what the coolest kid in my school is wearing. The coolest kid in my school has Air Jordans because that's what Nike said to buy. And, Nike, to me, for that, like, I want to say like a 10-year period, like 85 to 95 or, 85 to like, maybe even later, maybe 15 years, maybe to like 2000. They hit on everything. They had the right athletes. Their designers were killing it. Their marketing was incredible. I think Wyden and Kennedy, who did most of their ads in that period, it doesn't work without them. It doesn't work without Spike having his character Air Jordans and she's got to have it. And then like there's Nike all throughout Do the Right Thing and everything else. And then obviously his ads with Jordan. It was almost like a permission structure where it's like, yo, this is cool. And these are these people who say it's cool too. Charles Barkley. Back then, like David Fincher was shooting Nike commercials before he became Hollywood director. Like, Joe Pytka, who ended up doing Space Jam, was doing Nike commercials. Like, they were high budget brainwashing almost, but in the sense that like it worked. It worked. And other brands managed to like crack the code a little bit. It's like you had Reebok having like a run for a while. Adidas obviously did something for a bit with Run DMC. I think they were probably the first to really shift directly to pop culture as opposed to athlete. And you have this crazy like, brands have made it almost a self-contained thing. They design the shoe for the athlete. They seed influencers, quote unquote, on social media. And like, if it's a super limited run, by the time you even realize you want it, or by the time you're convinced you want it, it's already gone. Those influencers have already done their stories with them and sold them to Stadium Goods so you can buy them for like $2,000 when they got them for free. Or now you have athletes. I mean, dear God, like, and this is something I've never understood. You look at what Nike was like when those shoes all became popular. Like, Michael Jordan wore the same shoe for the entire season. He wore like 2 colorways, maybe 3, over the course of a season, including the playoffs. Now you have guys wearing a different shoe every game. Like, you see like LeBron wearing something. It's like, what even is that? Where did that even come from? And sure, like, if I was an NBA player, I guess I'd be like, yo, like, make me something new all the time. But if you're a kid and you want the shoe that your favorite player wears, what even is it? you don't know. It's not like there's just a away and playoff shoe or a home away all-star. It's like, no, it's this one specific shoe for this one specific game. All right, I give up.
Well, and it's not even the star players that are the only ones doing that. I think of a guy like PJ Tucker is probably the best known sneakerhead in the league right now. He's not even playing anymore, and he's still got a new pair every game that he's on the bench.
Right. I mean, PJ, like, you know, credit where credit is due. That dude, like, I almost feel like that dude pushed himself into an NBA career so he could afford sneakers. Like, I mean, I think he loved sneakers more than he loved basketball. And, you know, yeah, like the whole thing was like Jordan wore a new pair every game, and it was a new pair of the same shoe, basically. You know, PJ's out there wearing a new pair of something different. Or if you go back, like when Gilbert Arenas left Adidas, he was wearing all this crazy stuff. When Kobe left Adidas, he was wearing all this crazy stuff. When Vince Carter broke up with Puma, you know, like brands were sending him things. So I think it is kind of the main way an NBA player can express themselves. And I think it's funny to tie back into sort of the garbage with sports. It's like, yo, can you guys pick uniforms? I think it even started like the past couple of years. You would flip on an NBA game and I'm like, not only do I not know who the home team is, I don't even know what teams are playing. You know, and again, it goes back to like, wait, the most iconic uniforms in the NBA were always the Bulls, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Knicks. You know why? Because they never changed, or at least barely did. Like, you could flip on a game and know instantly who it was. You know, and meanwhile, you have like the Heat wearing black and pink, or my favorite, I think, like the Spurs were wearing like, I don't even know, was it like cream and orange or something? It was some weird, like, they picked some moment in San Antonio history, and it's just like,
yeah, they who have the Fiesta,
what are you gonna do? Uniforms like Pee Wee's bike?
It's awful.
And I mean, whatever. Sports, unfortunately, is a whole separate thing, you know. And it's like you realize with rich people in particular, but clearly the same applies to leagues or franchises. Like, they can never have money. You know, it's like I'm watching the Major League Baseball playoffs, and it's like, you really sold advertising space on batters' helmets to some brand from Germany that you can't even buy here to get what? Like, what can that possibly be doing for your bottom line when you spread it across the entire league? Or they do those, and this is my favorite probably, those little cut-in commercials that are half the screen. They did it with Ohtani up the other night. Like, and you're going to put an ad for a bank up opposite his start of his at-bat. Like, at what point do people just start turning the games off? Now, I'll admit, I haven't watched an NBA game this year, and I don't really even start thinking about it too much until like the Christmas Day slate anyway. When it's like, all right, I'm in front of the TV, I'm home, like I'm just going to leave it on. But like the NBA has been losing me, and I don't know. You know, at some point it's like, why even bother? And I don't want to get too far off topic, but can I just say the thing I probably hate the most, and this is all Kawhi Leonard's fault? I hate that almost any closeout on a three-point shooter now has to get reviewed to be a flagrant foul.
So as someone who was a big Spurs fan when that shot happened, I appreciate that the moment was taken seriously, but they've maybe taken it a little too fucking seriously at this point.
And I think, like, I mean, that's my biggest problem with sports now. But 1 and 1A are officiating and all the gambling stuff. Across all sports, like, look at the idea of the NFL not knowing what a catch is, which has been like a joke for years now. They've gotten so caught up in we have to be that they've forgotten, like, yo, it's a sport. People are watching, like, or like, you know, again, getting 2 feet down. Your players are humans. Your officials are humans. Let them call the game. I understand, like, look, if you want to do replay because a ball landed 10 feet foul and someone called it a home run and you want to call that back, no problem. You know, right. Or like, if someone clipped someone a cred, like when Carl Malone Isaiah Thomas and gave him like 40 stitches and you want to call that a flagrant, fine. But I think when you get into the really minuscule ticky-tack, let's do forensic files on this play, like, at some point you got to ask yourself, like, is this good for the sport? And, like, most of the time I feel like it's no.
Well, because as written, the clear and obvious standard, right? That's what they always say. It has to be clear and obvious to have an overturn. To me, clear and obvious means if you can't tell within 30 seconds of looking at the monitor that you got it wrong, then it's not clear and obvious. And then we just had to live with it.
And I don't think you should be watching like 100 different angles in slow motion. Watch it in real time once.
Like, if it's not flagrant, if it takes a video review to determine the flagrance of something, we've just lost the plot.
Right, and how flagrant is closing out on someone, especially now that shooters know, like, if someone gets in their landing area, they're going to get, 3 shots in the ball. Like, how many points would Reggie Miller have scored with that kind of refereeing?
Oh, the kick out? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, James Harden is probably my least favorite player in NBA history, and in part because I think, like, he kind of figured out how to game the system. And it's just like, that's great, and you might win games off it, but again, like, who wants to watch this? Like, it's still got to be entertainment at some level. And it's like, if you're just out there foul hunting, like, no, I actually don't want to watch that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a thing where I was reading earlier, I forget who wrote this article, but the way that the analytics evolution has affected the different sports. And with football, it's been good because throwing the ball is exciting. It's more efficient to throw the ball more often. But when you look at baseball, we now have the 3 true outcomes, and it's gotten better this year with some of the rule adjustments. But with basketball, it's basically become a 3-point and foul grifting competition at this point. And whoever hits more threes that night is going to win. It just becomes a math equation.
Right. And I don't know. I feel like I've been analytics arguing literally 25 years. I remember it was, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but David Berry, he did Wages of Wins, I think was his site. And I forget what stat he was pushing. But the thing I hated the most was always when they would retroactively apply efficiency numbers to, like, players who had played before. And, like, one of his big things was, like, Allen Iverson wasn't as good as everyone thinks he is and wasn't even, like, an average NBA player because he was so inefficient. And it's like, there's so much you can't measure. And it's like, I feel like a lot of this stuff has gotten to the point where people feel like if it can't be expressed by stats, it doesn't exist because that's all they'll talk about. And to me, it was like, yo, if Iverson took someone off the dribble and gets to the rim and misses a layup, okay, first of all, most players aren't going to be able to take their defender off the dribble like that. They're not going to get to the rim. And say he misses the layup. If 3 players converge on him to try and stop the shot and the ball goes off the other way and Theo Ratliff dunks it back in and the Sixers get points off the possession, why are you, like, penalizing him for missing that shot? It's like he's a chaos agent. And I think stuff like that, and it's kind of why it drives me crazy about Jordan with some stuff too, where it's like, it's not even efficiency, where it's like people automatically diss LeBron or someone as being a greatest of all time guy, like, because, oh my God, he lost in the finals. And it's like, LeBron played in the finals, what, like 10 times, 11 times?
8 straight.
To lose in the finals, you have to get to the finals.
Right, and like the year they made it in 2007, when he dragged that Cavs team all the way there, like, first of all, nobody on the planet, save maybe LeBron and like Boobie Gibson, thought the Cavs were going to win the finals over the Spurs, when they were in like their Death Star run. And it's like, you're telling me that LeBron at like, what was he, 22, 23 years old at that point, you're going to automatically like dump him out of being potentially the greatest because he lost in the finals as a 23-year-old? He was like a year older than Jordan was when Jordan like came into the league, maybe 2 years older. I don't know. It's just like the stat-based stuff is just get really bothersome. And I understand where, like, I got way off topic here.
No. The thing is, we are talking about back then, and that is largely what we are concerned with here. We're concerned with remembering guys. And so on the topic of like what is displeasing about the sport now, I wonder if there is any guys from the past that really come to mind for you in terms of what you think we've lost?
So I was kind of thinking about this, and like, I'll admit I went through some of your previous guys, but I'm not sure if this has been discussed. Have you guys ever talked about Eastern players in the NBA?
Eastern European players. Arvydas Sabonis, we did. I think we've talked about Drazen at length.
Okay, because I wanted to talk about someone who is a little less significant than those guys, but to me, he's a guy well worth remembering, and that would be Nikola Peković, who played for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Big Peck.
Back in, like, what would that be? That would be like the 2010s, thereabouts. So I think, like, you know, you had guys like Sabonis and Divac who obviously were centers who learned to pass because they were, you know, obviously coached very well and were professionals from when they were like 3 years old. Obviously, Drazen was a killer. You know, I think, like, had Drazen lived, I don't think we get as much, or it doesn't last as long. The whole, like, Europeans are soft thing, which was kind of not true to begin with. It's like, even like you look at someone like Tony Kukoc, who his introduction to the NBA was playing against the Dream Team when he was younger and having Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen be like, "You're not doing anything."
The thing that always comes to mind for like any Eastern European player that was called soft is that they were all like actively living in countries that were involved in wars in their lifetime at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Vlade, obviously, you know, like way back. But I think, like, the reason I love Peković, and it wasn't even just this, but there was a GIF or a Vine that always went around, and it was him sitting in the locker room talking to a reporter, and Ricky Rubio is sitting next to him, like when Ricky was like 19 years old. And I think he's looking at a stat sheet or looking down doing something. And I've never heard the audio. And I don't know if I would even understand the audio, but Peković must have said something because Ricky's head just pops up and he looks over him with this like strange expression on his face, like, what? But you had that brief run of like kind of Eastern European enforcers. Peck was one of them. And I don't know if you guys remember Pero Antić from the Hawks.
I was just going to say him.
His name wrong. But like another gigantic, goateed, sleeved guy who looked like a bodyguard at a nightclub in like a Michael Bay movie. He was just like, you are not messing with these dudes. And like, I don't know, I think one year you could have replaced the finals and had Pero just fight Peković for like the NBA championship. Or have an arm wrestling contest or something along those lines. I'm trying to think, like, first of all, I have a Pero game-worn Hawks jersey thanks to Lang Whitaker, who was at the Hawks at the time, and like, yo, that thing is ginormous. I could like wear it as a toga. Just like belt it somewhere in the middle. I forget what size it is even, but like it's absurd. I just love the idea of those guys enforcers. Like you said, like these guys grew up like war-torn areas. You just wouldn't mess with them.
There is one particular picture of Pero Antić. I was not as familiar with it. I had to look him up. The bodyguard in a movie was absolutely correct. Because I will say, Nikola Peković, little less intimidating because to me, I was seeing buff Mr. Bean or Rowan Atkinson.
Yeah.
Pero Antić, scary as shit. Pero Antić looks like he could fucking crush my skull.
He would have been, I think this might even be a better comparison. He would have been a great antagonist in a Fast and Furious movie. Like, he would be the guy where it's like you look at Vin Diesel and he's like, oh yeah, Vin's pretty jacked. Like, whoa, wait a minute. What about that guy? He definitely could have been the Eastern European Rock if he wanted to. And I think it is Pero, and don't hold me to this, but I think he did have some like sort of connections, if you will.
Well, no, home. This is the other thing I want to bring up. That is, I believe, Nikola Peković that you were referring to, because as it says here on his Wikipedia page here, Peković is connected to several underworld figures, most notably Montenegrin drug lord Darko Saric, who has been held in custody since 2011. Peković has numerous business investments with Saric in Serbia and Montenegro.
I mean, I guess when you're there, like, and you have that much money as you would even as a journeyman NBA player, like, there's a limited group of people who you could be involved with. But, and also Darko Saric sounds like an NBA player too. Like,
I mean, Dario.
I thought it said
exists.
Dario for a second.
And his
There's been
brother
plenty of
Dario
Darkos,
Milicic.
I think there was a Saric too.
Dario.
There was
Like,
Dario
Croatian
Saric,
sensation.
he's still with the
Suns?
Warriors, I want to say. He's a backup
It's
center for
Warriors
somebody.
now.
It might be the Warriors.
I mean, there was definitely a period where you thought like Eastern Europe was going to be even more of a presence. You know, like obviously when Darko Milicic got picked so high and Nikola Skeetishvili, it was kind of a tradition. You know, I went to the draft most years in the early 2000s, and like the second round was always the best part because you'd get these random Eastern European guys getting picked, and they would come out of the stands to shake hands with, I guess it was the deputy commissioner doing around. Like someone would get called who you'd never heard of. 6'11" would come and like walk from behind you. I don't know, and like Skeetishvili was really good until he got hurt. I thought like some of those guys, but again, like Peck was the best because like I think it was Talk Hoops would post. There's a vine of him too, like running back down court, and he's running like I don't know, like a linebacker from the 50s. Like his head is down, and like he's just running like this gigantic robot. Like I just miss guys like that.
All right, so he's only Minnesota. I wasn't sure if he had ever made it to any other team. We've got 6 years in Minnesota total, 271 games.
What was his first year in Minnesota?
So 2010, 2011 is his first in Minnesota. I don't know if that's... I'm trying to check when he was drafted. He's drafted in 2008, stays for 2 more years, and then 2010, 2011 is the first year he plays in Minnesota.
KG could have used him. He would have been helpful in like 2004.
When KG heard that he wasn't coming over that first year, that's he had the vindication for being in Boston.
Yeah, guess what? It was that front court would have been with Kevin Love for
Kevin
most
Love.
of those
Yep.
years.
It was him and Kevin Love.
Two far different applications of the NBA 6'10" white guy.
Yeah, it's the palest front court, but 2 very different shades of pale.
Yeah, and two very different upbringings. I don't think Peck had any former Beach Boys in his life.
Well, I mean, that's why he went out and met a bunch of drug lords, I guess. Those are your 2 chances. You can either grow up with former Beach Boys or Montenegrin drug lords.
Lord, Ricky Rubio must have lots of fun contacts in his phone by now. Hopefully they've stayed in touch.
I'm just in the middle of all of it.
Well, that's it too. Like Perro came over here and played for a while and went back. Like I think he might have just played for the Hawks. Like he might have had a year with someone else. But you know, it's like it's funny. These guys come over and play like for a brief period of time, and then it's like, oh, back to Europe. You know, and I assume with some of these guys, it's like you just want to know if you can do it. It's like, can I play in the NBA? And once you can, like, yeah, you kind of probably want to go home.
I've fallen down a rabbit hole of these guys at this point. So I'm looking at Vladimir Radmanovic, the Serb who played for the Clippers and the Lakers and messed up his shoulders snowboarding and got in big trouble doing that.
I think we definitely called him snowboard while we were at Slam. He had cornrows one year too, which was a horrible experiment. I think he had like beads on the end of them too. Like some of those guys definitely adopted the wrong parts of American culture, or certainly at least parts of American culture that probably shouldn't have been for them.
I'm looking
Yeah,
at
he
the
played for
picture of
the
his
Sonics.
cornrows right now. It's horrendous. Oh my God.
Was that when he was on the Sonics?
Yes, he's on Seattle. He has cornrows, and there are yellow and blue beads all throughout his cornrows.
It was a bad idea. It's definitely up there with like when Beckham had cornrows. Although maybe even worse, because obviously Vladimir Radmanovic was never the figure that Beckham was.
And he was 6'10". Imagine a 6'10" Serb walking down the street with long cornrows with colorful beads in it.
Imagine a 6'10" Serb with cornrows snowboarding. Good Lord, dude. That's part of like the terrible NBA injuries, right up there with Luke Longley, like bodyboarding and hurting himself, which I believe both of them were being coached by Phil Jackson at the time, who you start to realize like why he decided to get out of coaching.
So the way this is starting to feel like is a choice between Nikola Peković and Pero Antić. Because there's one other thing about Pero Antić I want to bring up that is made me feel like he has just a little bit more guy credential. There's a very specific bit of history. He is the person that was with Thabo Sefolosha when Thabo Sefolosha was arrested outside the nightclub in New York. He is also arrested with him. These are the two players arrested after Chris Copeland of the Pacers was stabbed. I didn't remember that's why the police were involved in the first place.
I don't know if I would arrest Pero.
Like, the cops that put him in cuffs is
Pero,
crazy.
very bad idea.
Yeah.
I'd use about 8 of those, like, zip tie cuffs.
Yeah, I would.
He does look like a Fast and Furious
Pero,
villain.
Yeah, he had the shed. He had lots of ink. He wore number 6, I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah.
6. I gotta look for that jersey one of these days. But that was kind of a wild time for the Hawks, too. You gotta wonder what some of those, like, locker room conversations were like. Because you had, like, him, Josh Smith, Josh Childress. You know, it's like, Josh went to Stanford, and then Pero, who, Lord knows. What
did Pero Antić and Thabo Sefolosha talk about in the back of a police car on the way to getting booked? What are those two guys talking about in that situation?
Was that when Thabo broke his leg?
Yeah. This is this incident.
And Thabo, to bring things full circle with sneakers, Thabo played in Air Max 90s. He played in, like, ancient Nike running shoes, which to me was like a one-man kind of argument against technology mattering. Like, he's playing in a retro version of a shoe that wasn't even a great running shoe in 1990, and he's playing in the NBA in it. I'm curious. I feel like he played in it even after he broke his leg, which to me is like asking to everything else or everything else.
I was going to say that shoe was less damaging to his legs than the New York Police Department.
He's not alone in that, I'm sure. He's way up there with guys who like hire because he wore them all the time. Like Gilbert Arenas wore a pair of what's his name? Why am I spacing on it? Forget it. He wore a pair of Dolce & Gabbana shoes in an NBA game. And it's like, all right, if you can play in those, like, why not just go out, like, tape your ankles, put your socks on, and go out and play? Nick Young. They were Nick Young's.
That's right.
Nick Young wore them to the locker room and was like, those are our colors. I don't know if he told Nick he was going to play in them or just played in them on his own, but yeah, people have played in lots of weird stuff.
So if you were offered the choice between Pero Antić and Nikola, or hey, Xavier and Diaz, maybe I'm going crazy out here. The person that was brought up first was Peković, but I feel like it's become an either or.
I mean, as far as we always like those tangential connections to things that we remember. And the fact that Pero Antić is the other player to be arrested in one of the most consequential arrests of a player in NBA history. Because if you look at that Hawks team, that was the year that they were the 1 seed. They were like 67-15. And it was based on every player in that system had their role. Thabo was the stopper. Kyle Korver was the shooter. Al Horford was the high post, like kind of classic pivot that you would run the offense through. And losing Thabo, like I'm not saying he was a LeBron stopper, but he was at least a LeBron slower downer. And the fact that they didn't have him, that's why that became the sweep. So the fact that Pero is a part of that feels very consequential. Unlike in Peković, longer NBA career and arguably a better NBA player. But like the most memorable thing about those Wolves teams is Kevin Love had a 20 rebound streak at a certain point for him. I don't know if they won a playoff series.
I'm just enjoying all of the Eastern Europeans I'm thinking about Andres Biedrins now, Jan Vesely. I like just the concept.
We've lost Xavier. He's just
the concept of 2010s Eastern European big men that are just randomly there. I'm fine with either of those two, but also just the concept of these big men as well. We can induct one and the concept of the remainder.
okay.
Yeah, Andres Biedrins couldn't shoot free throws. Vesely, like, Lord knows who got drafted behind him, but like, that was the Wizards, right? I think they picked him. Like, that was a nightmare of a pick. Yeah, I mean, you could obviously expand like to even just European big men of that period when like, who was it? The Knicks drafted who? Why am I spacing on his name? Who Vince Carter jumped over? Frederick Weiss.
Yeah,
The Stifle Tower Hall of Guy inductee. He's a member.
Oh,
You clearly understand the vibe we're going for very well.
and who was the guy the Magic picked who never over?
I know who you're talking about.
He was like a top 10 pick or close to it. One of us will remember, but there was a period like 10 years ago or so. I went on a brief spree of buying rookie cards of complete busts, and that dude had I have the card somewhere, but it was a relic card. They cut up his draft hat and put it in cards, and it's like, yo, that was all he had.
Yeah,
He never
it made it over, and he did it.
It was Fran Vasquez.
Yep,
Fran
2005
Vasquez.
11th
Yeah,
overall
Fran
pick, Fran
Vasquez.
Vasquez.
Fran Vasquez. That was all there was. Like, was his draft hat. Like, how did you get him to give that up? He had nothing else.
They finally renounced his draft rights this summer to get under the cap. July 6th of this year, they renounced his draft rights.
How old is he? He's got to be like late 30s by now.
He's 41.
Probably wasn't going to come over. It would have been funny if he was like, yo, I'm ready now.
He's been retired for 4 years.
A fun fact about Fran Vasquez. If you consider the pick that was eventually used to take him, he was traded for Tracy McGrady when the Magic got Tracy.
Crazy.
Was August 3rd, 2000, traded by the Orlando Magic as future 2005 first round pick to the Raptors for Tracy McGrady.
I like to think that the Magic this summer were like, all right, you know what? Paolo's playing really well. We can finally tell Fran we're good. We're good.
Yeah, we have finally found our succession plan at big man to.
Yeah,
execute.
you can be officially retired. We definitely don't need you now. But yeah, to get back, like, I would go with Pero, only because, like, if you want to say, like, Peck, has to Montenegrin drug lords, and Pero could have absolutely been one himself while he was in the NBA. And I think he's a guy where it's like, if you remind people of him, and like, it is funny to think of him with that Hawks squad. Because wasn't that the Hawks team where it's like they insisted 5 of them be player of the week one week?
Yes.
Yeah, the Hawks starting 5 was named the player of the week.
Like, I think that, I want to say that was probably, and the NBA, I think, has finally gotten over it. That might have been some like 2004 Pistons hangover where it's like, no, it's teams. We need to like, because then like 4 of them made the All-Star team, I think, and like there was some argument that a 5th one should have made it, and it's just like, yo, like, relax. You can have a good team, and you don't have to like individually recognize all of them.
Yeah, they somehow justified putting Kyle Korver in the All-Star game, and I'm a Kyle Korver. I love him. I'm a Sixers fan when he came up with us. Love a good sharpshooter. Kyle Korver never had any business being in an All-Star game.
Played a long time.
He's one of those, I wonder if he came, and we're getting off topic a little bit, but if he came around about 10 years later, is he just Klay Thompson? I don't know if he could have defended on Klay.
I was going to say, I don't know what his defensive reputation is.
The one that kills me, and like, this is probably getting even further off topic, but like, if you look at Ray Allen's numbers, and like his numbers were, his 3-point shooting and usage was like way above contemporaries from like the mid 90s until like even, whenever he retired in the 2000s. But like, that dude should have taken twice as many threes. And like, had he done that, had Ray Allen like been given the ball as much as he should have, I don't know if Steph would have caught him yet. Like, you think Ray Allen was 6'6", shot jumpers from 3-point, or like nobody could stop him. And it's kind of funny to think like, okay, like, yeah, they won a title in Boston, but it's like, you literally got Ray Allen at his maybe a little post peak, but not by much. And we're like, yeah, you're going to be the third option behind Kevin and Paul Pierce. Like, what? Ray Allen, they should have built the offense around him on team he ever played for. Instead,
and it still
he's on
took
the
Doc
Bucks
Rivers 26 games to win the finals with that core.
But I mean, Ray Allen was in Milwaukee taking fewer shots than Glenn Robinson. Like, what are you doing?
Jeez.
Not by much, maybe, but still, like, only team he was like legit the number one option on was when he was in Seattle, and that team was just bad. Even imagine Miami, if they looked for him more. It's like he hit that shot against San Antonio, and it's like, yo, you realize he could have been doing that for you all the time?
That was like the crystallizing moment. That was when I was really coming into like being a Spurs fan. I'd gotten into them in high school, and like when Ray Allen gets that ball, it's the most, well, fuck, this game's over. And I think that just forces, I don't remember if it forces overtime or if it does just like end the game right there. But no matter what, there was still a game 7. Yeah, right. Yeah, it was still just going to absolutely like be over. It was just the most automatic thing. And there was the question, why haven't the Heat been doing this the entire series?
But that, I think, was unfortunately just payback for the Spurs for, and I don't know if you guys, the Sean Elliott shot over Rasheed Wallace.
Yeah.
Spurs Blazers. I've looked at it 1,000,000 times, and I still have zero idea how that shot even got off. Like, Sean Elliott had to shoot that straight up and like out of the solar system to come back down just to get over Sheed. And Sheed, not exactly known as a defender in his career, but that was a hell of a closeout. Like, you had Sean Elliott standing like with his heels over the line, barely in bounds.
If the heels had touched, he would have been out.
I don't know. You could go on. I also love the talking about closeouts. The John Stockton one that beat the Charles Barkley Suns, and with Charles Barkley with like the worst ever 3-point closeout. I think he thought like they could call flagrants back then. I don't know how you're like 6'4" and let John Stockton get a 3 over you, but
a true embarrassment for Karl Malone. But one guy that does not need to feel embarrassed for his efforts this week is Pero Antić. Diaz, would you do the honors for our big Macedonian boy?
Yes, he is the pride of Macedonia. He has been compared to Kratos from the God of War video game series. Might have been just as vicious back in Macedonia. We don't know about that, but on the basketball court, surprising good 3-point threat as a big man. Certainly not somebody you want to cross. We won't cross him. Instead, we will let him cross the threshold into our Hall of Guy. Welcome to the Hall of Guy, Pero Antić.
Looking at these two side by side, I think like the biggest thing that vindicates this decision is going back to the henchman thing. Like, if you see Nikola Peković as a henchman, he's going to be the first guy taken out, like when the shit goes in that first scene. Pero Antić, the earliest you're like, he's maybe the mini boss in the Fast and Furious at worst. I think you're right that he can stand as villain, but like worst case scenario, he's making it an hour and a half in before he goes down.
Yeah, worst case scenario, he's the boss's main guy.
Yeah, he has a bad name in a James Bond movie, but he does have a name versus Nikola Peković, who is just like the guy that he takes out before the credits sting. Exactly.
I'll have to hang Pero's jersey from the ceiling later, and it'll probably actually reach to the floor.
Yeah, just double as a curtain, yeah.
Well, Russ, thank you, dude, so much for coming on to have this conversation about your various expertise in both shoes and guys. If people are interested in perhaps gleaning some more about that expertise, what are some things they can do to follow you?
I think probably the best places to find me these days would be either Instagram or Blue Sky, where I'm just Russ Bengtson. I guess I actually forget what my entire Blue Sky address is. I've sort of abandoned Twitter since the takeover, although you can still find me there at Russ Bengston. I can't guarantee I'll reply on there, but I can at least be found.
And folks, if there's anything from us you are looking to find, any of our Blue Sky socials, we are also not on Twitter, but you can find us all at bit.ly/rememberthatguy to get that, to get any of our writings, and to get more info about the show. Some thanks are in order to not just our guest Russ, but also to producer Craig and the coders behind him, to our musical director Don Ham for that lovely theme music, and most of all, you, dear listener, for joining us once again. That, I believe, is everything I have for this week, but is there anything else from anyone here on the way out?
Nothing from me.
I hope by the time that this episode releases, Joel Embiid and Paul George have played a game for the Sixers. That's my only hope.
I will add the appropriate sound effect, Diaz. I hope it's a ding. But until I get a chance to add that, I'll have just been one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
Guest at large, Russ Bengston.
And I'm Diaz, and as Mars Blackman once said, it's got to be the guys.
I slid in the DMs of a backup center for the Sixers, and I got 10 times better customer service, included shipping sent directly to my apartment. And the hoodie is like the best hoodie that I have. It's so warm. Like, if it's 30 degrees out, I can wear a t-shirt under that hoodie and just that hoodie. And I'm not saying I'm going to be warm, but I'm not going to be cold. I've never seen another out the mud, like, hoodie, t-shirt, anything in the wild. Like, it's my dream.
I'm fairly certain that musical director Don Ham has one. I know musical director Don Ham ordered one at one point. There was some drama as to whether he would ever get it. But I'm fairly certain Don Ham has an out the mud. He can correct me if he hears this at the end of the episode.
Good. I hope so. There's literally dozens of us.